Wow, I cannot believe we've already hit July. It feels just like yesterday that we were kicking off season 6, when really that was back in October? Whoa! You know what? Let's make sure we have another solid episode. Welcome back to The Right Way, where we talk book recs, author interviews, and creative writing tips. If you haven't already done so, please make sure to click subscribe and hit the bell for notifications on new videos just like this one. I have a great episode for you, but I'd like to share a few announcements before getting into this month's content. Next week is the last live stream of Season 6. I'll be continuing with my writing workshop series from the Hanford branch of the Kings County Library. Last month's workshop focused on world building. This month we will be focusing on the steps a writer needs to take to pen the first chapter or draft of their story. 2 weeks after that, I'll launch the Season 6 finale, which will be focused on the second annual Righties Awards. As of noon Pacific Standard Time today, however, the voting will be open for you to help me select the winners. There is no cap on how many times you can vote, so make sure you vote for your favorite top 10 guest host, your favorite author interview, and your favorite Author Awareness April interview. 3 categories there. Voting will be open for 10 days, so make sure to look for that link and get your votes in. Lastly, I've set myself a goal of selling 500 copies of my books for the year. We are more than halfway through the year and I haven't even come close to that goal. But you can help me out by going to the link in the video description and picking up your copies of my series. You'd really be doing me a huge favor. So over the last few years, I've provided lists of audiobooks that I've been listening to because I like to recommend audiobooks as well as analog or paperback versions. Throughout 2023, I kept adding books to my reading goal, and I ended up reading more than 40 titles, most of which were audiobooks of various lengths. This year, 2024, my goal is 30, and I'm already more than halfway to that goal. Last month I featured the bottom 5 in my top 10 list of audio selections, so let's recap them before jumping into the top 5. At number 10 I had What If by Randall Munroe, narrated by Will Wheaton. Number 9 was Darkness Visible by Arvin Ethan David, narrated by a full cast including Christian McKay and Miranda Richardson. In at number 8 was Expeditionary Force Book 1 Columbus Day by Craig Allenson, narrated by R.C. Bray. Number 7 was Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, narrated by Jeffrey Howard. And then finally, number 6, Yamada Monogatari, Demon Hunter by Richard Parks, and narrated by Brian Nishi. In the number 5 spot, we have James Moriarty Consulting Criminal by Andy Weir, narrated by Graham Malcolm. This short audiobook explores the early formation of Moriarty's criminal enterprises and his first interactions with his soon-to-be right-hand man, Moran. The story ends with a nod to an early thwarting at the hands of a not-yet-in-demand Sherlock Holmes. At number 4, we have the Breakthrough series, written by Michael C. Grumley, narrated by Scott Brick. All 6 books in this series, Breakthrough, Leap, Catalyst, Ripple, Mosaic, and Echo, have a really cool Michael Crichton meets Tom Clancy vibe that I really enjoyed. On top of that, Brick is one of my favorite narrators, so it's a double win in my book. At number 3, I have The Method by James Patterson and Michael B. Silver, narrated by a full cast including Zachary Quinto and Stephanie Beatrice. This dramatic and suspenseful story explores what happens when a method actor gets too deep into taking his work home with him after getting cast as the lead in a television series about a serial killer, and the toll it takes on his psyche. The performances are solid, and I couldn't put down the book, listening to it in a single day. I'm not usually a James Patterson reader, but I enjoyed this title. In the penultimate slot is another full cast dramatization of The Sandman Part 1 by Neil Gaiman, with performances by James McAvoy as Dream, Kat Dennings as Lady Death, and Michael Sheen as Lucifer. This was a well-done production with a cast playing their roles well. It's proof positive for how talented McAvoy is as an actor to bring so much seething danger to a character who can be as endearing as he can be malicious. If his performance in Split wasn't proof enough, this dramatization certainly is. Finally, in the number 1 spot is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton, narrated by James Cameron Stewart. This is not your ordinary whodunit murder mystery. I won't give anything of the gimmick away, but it is definitely going to keep you engaged in the clues right up to the very end. I particularly enjoyed this book because it was actually a recommended title back at the beginning of Season 6, presented to me by my guest host, Thea Landon. Now, if you're interested in giving any of these books a listen, I picked them up with my subscription to Audible. No, I'm not doing any kind of advertisement for this service. They are not a sponsor, but I do enjoy having Audible, and I found it a great way to read as voraciously as I can while I'm, in the car or at work. And if audiobooks aren't for you, I've listed each title with their ISBN numbers down in the video description. Happy reading! In recent years, blending genres has become a super popular way to market books to more than one demographic. One of the more popular combinations has been romantasy, which is a blending of romance and fantasy. This month's interview features Kyrie Wang, a Canadian YA author of medieval adventure and clean romance. I hope you enjoy the final Season 6 conversation. Hey Kyrie, thank you for joining me. It's great to have you. Tell me a little bit about what you write and about your work.
So I'm a young adult author who loves medieval times. So I write medieval adventure with wholesome romance. My favorite tropes in reading have always been enemies to lover, but with wholesome romance, and found family. So in the series I'm writing right now, Enemy's Keeper, almost all the books I've outlined will feature those two tropes, enemies to lovers and found family. I would say that my audience has been from age 10 to over 70, so pretty much any age. And I'm proud of that.
That's really cool. So how did you get started as a writer? Was this something that you've always wanted to do, or was this something that you decided, you woke up one morning and you're like, I want to write a book?
Okay. It's a little bit of both, actually. So I wrote my first novel when I was 8 years old. I was very much into the Boxcar Children. I don't know if anybody's still aware of that series. Fantastic. You're the first person, in fact, I've talked to who knows about it. But I really enjoy that series. So I wrote my spin-off of, other children running off and living in a boxcar when I was 8. And of course, that was just for myself. And then growing up, I wrote a lot of Pokemon fan fiction. I wrote a lot of video game fan fiction. But it was all for myself, like Golden Sun for Game Boy Advance. I was a huge Zelda nerd too. Tried a little bit of fan fiction. Never took it seriously. My, I guess, serious career goal was to be a physician, which I am right now. And I wrote the Enemy's Keeper series, in fact, over 10 years ago, probably around 15 now, when I was in medical school. And the prequel was when I was 15 or 16, but the bulk of Enemy's Keeper was doing medical school. And it was really just a way of coping with the stresses of studying and of doing. It's a little bit difficult to talk about, but I also am trained to do autopsies because I'm a pathologist. So seeing all that kind of darker side of humanity, I needed something that would pick me up and promise me a happy ending. and I can only really promise a happy ending if I wrote it. And that's how the Healer's Blade started. Um, and yeah, so it was not going to be published, in fact, until the pandemic hit. And being the pathologist, I don't see patients live. I'm not trained anymore. I don't remember how to prescribe medicine or resuscitate people. My work is with the pathology microscope, so I make diagnosis of cancer. That's my main job. And when the pandemic hit, like 30,000 surgeries were canceled in my province, and that was my work as well because I don't get the specimens anymore when they're canceled. And suddenly found myself like devoid of work in 2020, whereas I know most medical doctors were very busy. I was like, well, I have this book. In fact, I've written 4 by that point, but I've never thought about publishing. So why not do something productive during this time? And that's actually why I published Healer's Blade.
So obviously, you said that what you studied in medical school and your work kind of gave you the inspiration to write something more lighthearted. What other inspirations do you draw from as a writer? Is it music? Is it art, media? What generates that interest for you?
Yeah, actually, it is medieval history. So I mentioned I was a Zelda nerd, and Zelda is like the first historical fantasy that I fell head over heels with. It's got so many references to like Norse legend, and like people probably don't know about Epona, and like these are names from other cultures that they've borrowed into the video game. So in high school, I became very interested in medieval history and just spent like a whole summer researching it, nerding out because I was a teenager and I had time.
Yeah.
And the more I read about medieval times, the more I was like fascinated by this era. Like there's so much at stake. Like anybody goes to war can get, just shot once and they die from a festering wound. Even though nowadays, like it's almost nothing. Appendicitis, you operated on, no problem. Appendicitis back then, I think you'd die. So all these things, like life was so fragile back then, and yet so much was accomplished. These great acts of bravery, so much courage, and people really were facing life and death very, very often, and they didn't have that kind of food security and like socioeconomic security that we have now. And I was like, wow, out of this period, there's got to be so many stories about people helping each other, people surviving that are not told because the bulk of history is written by, first of all, the rich people, the people who could pay for scribes and historians, and then finally the winners.
Right.
So what about all the other people who had no voice? And that's where I started thinking about, what about a beggar or a thief who tried to turn his life around? What would that have been like in medieval times? So actually, that's how I wrote the prequel to the Enemy's Keeper series. It's not published anymore. I sold it for the medical school talent show. But that actually follows exactly that, a young thief from medieval times who tries to turn his life around.
That's cool.
His name is Cato. His side character is still in the Enemy's Keeper series.
That's cool. Now you said said the word bender, and I'm thinking, are you an Avatar: The Last Airbender fan at all?
No, did I say bender? Did I say that by accident?
I think you did, and I'm like, oh, cool. That's something we can geek out about.
No, I stopped talking about medieval history. So
Oh, gotcha.
yeah, medieval history and what else? Just like stories from everyday people, like when you chat with people at a party and like hearing about what they do. So as part of my job, I fly up north to serve more the Indigenous community in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see them, but I get their specimens. But on the plane that I take every other week, I meet people who come from all over the place. Some of them have been flown from Indigenous territories to give talks about healing, like taking my plane, but 5 stops further all the way to northern Canada to speak to the Indigenous community. Others are construction workers who are working on a school somewhere up north, mining engineers, mine workers.
Wow.
So just hearing their stories, it's a very different kind of plane, I guess, passenger selection than people you would meet on a flight to Seattle. Like they're very much work focused, and it's usually work from like people who work in domains I never would interact with. So just hearing their stories, I add a little bit of here and there into my novels.
That's really cool. What has been the hardest part or the biggest challenge that you've faced in the creation of your series?
The creation part, like probably learning how to plot properly was the hardest part. So I think creation could be taken pretty broadly because I could write this thing and then no one ever reads it. So does that really make me an author? But so we can talk about both things. The pantsing part I learned the hard way. So I mentioned I wrote 4 books before I published the first one. Well, the 4th book was at a absolute standstill. Like I couldn't budget forward for about a year because I basically pantsed myself in a dead end. So for standalones, I think it's possible for me still to pants them. But for a series that is, it's not even standalone, connected standalone, so it's really one big story. I really had to go back to the first book and be like, outline the whole plot for this one. The second plot needs to be a complete story in itself and yet be connected to the first and the third. So I'm still outlining books 2, 3, and 4 at the same time and then like tweaking it once in a while. So learning to plot has been very difficult. The Vanity Press, I do want to just mention it briefly. I talk about it a lot in my blog about this certain company that I just will not mention because I'm also already very vocal about it on Reddit. So people who want to look at the review of X company will see me. But what I would tell authors is that you can definitely pay for a quality editor, a book designer, internal layout, make your book very professional. But do not pay somebody just to hit the publish button for you, because that's what I did. And that was very stupid because to upload your book on Ingram Sparks and to upload it in KDP for Amazon, it's free. And it's not any more difficult than this company will make it be for you, where you have to upload into their system your keywords, your blurb, your cover, and so on and so forth. And then just literally copy and paste whatever you say onto Amazon and Ingram Sparks. But you pay them hundreds and thousands of dollars to do that. And then you're stuck. Your book is stuck under their name and they control your prices and everything like that.
So that kind of brings me up on to the next question. If you could give any advice to other would-be authors watching this interview, what would you say to them?
So I kind of went over my biggest point already, which was to be very careful about where you put your money. Even for editing and cover design, I find that some of the prices are very extravagant for what you get. And I mean, it's harder to judge like one editor with a lot of experience versus another one less experience. Yes, the one that charges more with a lot of experience may be actually worth the price, but just be very careful about where you put your money because it's a domain where the people know that you are so invested in this book baby, like you work so hard on it, and you would literally throw your money, before people so that you can your dream of being a published author can come true, but still be very rational about where you put your money. And do not pay anybody just to hit the publish button for you.
Awesome. Well, Kyrie, we're coming up to the end. What is the best way for people to get a hold of you and your work, and how can they connect with you? What are those best ways for you?
My author's website is simply kyriewang.com. And then I'm also quite active on Instagram. It's the at commercial, the at button, at commercial in French. So author Kyrie W for both Facebook and Instagram.
Awesome.
So you can connect with me there.
And are your books available on your website, or are they only exclusively on Amazon?
Oh, they are on Amazon. So Killer's Blade is on Amazon KU. So unfortunately, the ebook is on Amazon only. For The Thief's Keeper, that's my prequel, my latest release from March. That one is available free for my newsletter subscribers. So you simply go to my website and you'll have several places where you can sign up to get it for free. Or it's on all major e-retailers like Barnes & Noble, Amazon for 99 cents.
That's awesome. Well, Kyrie, thank you very much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.
If you're interested in picking up copies of Kyrie's work or connecting with her on social media, you can find those links down in the video description. Welcome back for our deep dive discussion into poetry. Last month we discussed how to write ghazals, which are a Persian prayer song form used as love letters meant to evoke either romantic love or love of the divine. This month we are wrapping up our poetry discussion with limericks. While this probably feels like it would have been better for March in light of St. Patrick's Day, I decided to hold off until July because it's a very short form. Limericks are 5 lines long and meant to be spoken with a sing-song cadence. There is a specific rhyme scheme incorporated at the end of the lines, forming an AABBA pattern. This means lines 1, 2, and 5 have the same rhyming sound, and lines 3 and 4 have their own rhyming sound. While there is no particular syllable count to the lines, the first, third, and fifth lines tend to have a longer syllable count than lines 3 and 4. For example, here's one that I wrote, ironically, for St. Patrick's Day a few years ago. There once was a man from Cork, who was a wee bit of a dork. He stole me gold, and truth be told, I stabbed him with a fork. So here's a list of tips to help you master the art of the limerick. Tip number 1, create an AABBA rhyme scheme. If you go back to my example, I used cork, dork, told, gold, and fork. Play around with your word choices and focus the sounds of the words to make them sharper. The sharper the sound, the more it pops when spoken in cadence. In fact, one-syllable rhyming words work best. Tip number 2, use a syllable scheme. While there is no specific syllable count like the sonnet or the elegy, limericks typically have 8 or 9 syllables in lines 1, 2, and 5, with 5 to 6 syllables in lines 3 and 4. Keep in mind this is a recommendation, not a rule. Play around with the flow of your syllables in a way that's consistent. The rhythm should feel like da-da-dum, 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 da-da-dum. Man, I feel really dumb right now. Tip number 3, think of something funny or entertaining to you. Many limericks incorporate something funny and perhaps incorporate a name to make the story as specific and funny as possible. You might also incorporate elements of your own city or town to personalize the funny story that cracks you up. Tip number 4, end the poem with some kind of resolution to the story it's telling. And that's it. I mean, that's my last writing tip of season 6. Holy crap. So here's what you do. You create the AABBA rhyme scheme. AABBA. With strong single-syllable word choices for your rhyming words. You incorporate a consistent syllable scheme to your lines to give them that bouncy, sing-songy feel. You make sure the story that your poem tells is funny and personal to you, and give the poem story some kind of resolution. So here's your prompt. Think of a funny limerick base for the story of an idiot who makes a stupid dumbass mistake, like say he falls into a second-floor laundry chute during the Christmas holidays. There's no reason why I would bring that up, especially that specific example, right? Right. When you're ready to share your limerick, you can do so by posting it in the video comments down below. You can send it to me via email at gkjpublishing@gmail.com, or you can share it with me on Instagram and X at gkj_publishing. I'd love to read it and offer you some feedback. Hey, thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and click the bell for notifications when new content is released. Make sure to tune in 3 weeks from today for the Season 6 finale and the second annual Writies Awards. I'll see you then.